Looks good to
Right?
me.
Okay. So, hi everybody, and I'm Daiane Barbosa. I'm a PhD student from State University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and I make part of my research here in CSUB with Dr. Pratt. And today I will talk about, in the general, how the trees grows, but I will bring some part of my research is that with the tropical species and how the growth of these species is very different from different areas in the world, specifically talking about the trees, for example, here in California, to have an idea how the environment have influences in this process. So I am a bachelor in biological science, a master in plant biology, and a PhD in plant biology too. I'm working with plants maybe 8 years, a little more than this. And I came from Brazil, is in South America. Specifically, I came from Rio de Janeiro, is a big city in Brazil, and is an amazing city with a high diversity in the culture and the art. And all my career, I was constructing in the State University of Rio de Janeiro, that is one of the best universities in my country. And my PhD student is in this island that the name is Ilha Grande. We can't translate the name of different spaces, regions, but it's like a big island. It's an island in Rio de Janeiro, and I'm in my fourth year of my PhD. And the first two, I went every month for this island to collect samples of wood and analyze how the leaves change along the year to see how this tree grows. So before we talk about how the plants grow, we need to understand how these different climates have influences in this process and why different regions have different climates. For example, we can see different features very different in the climates of here, Bakersfield. Like here, we can see the change in the temperature. The range of change in the temperature is very high, going of 59 Fahrenheit to 104, and the raining going off nothing, like now, 0 millimeters to 30 millimeters. And in Rio de Janeiro, place that I came from, a tropical areas, the climate is very different. The range of temperature is not too high, like here in Bakersfield. We're going off 68 to 780 Fahrenheit, the temperature, and the pluviosity is very different. We're going off 40 millimeters to 175 every month rain in this place in different levels, and in different regions this is different too, but we will keep it general. So in the general, we have polar area that have the mainly features like lowest temperature and lowest rainfall. The temperate areas, the mainly characteristics is the high range of difference in the temperature and well-defined rain seasons. Tropical areas have a less range of variation in the temperature along the year and high rainfall. And the subtropical area have climate features very similar to temperate areas. But what causes climate difference across the planet? So there are a lot of explanation for that, but I will keep the mainly explanation for this. And the first of all is the amount of energy between each part of this planet, because we are almost a sphere, And this make that the lights arrive here in different way. This means that tropical area receive the light in a perpendicular angle. This make that the energy that arrive in this place is bigger comparative with the regions that is close to the poles of the Earth, that the lights arrive not perpendicular. This make that the light is over there, but not too much energy. This make that tropical areas have more heat, is more hot. And how this place is more hot, the evaporation is bigger in this place too, making that the humidity is bigger in this place. And this make that the rainy level is bigger in this place too. Another thing very important is like the Earth is running around the sun along the year. The Earth is running along itself in the angle of maybe 25 degrees. This make that in the part of the year, one part of the planet is more exposed to the sun, to the energy, comparative with the another part. Like if the north hemisphere hemisphere is more exposed to the sun, have more heat in this place, so more energy is the summer in this place. In the opposite happens with the southern hemisphere, that the light is less intense in this place, is that winter in this part of the year. And the opposite happen too when the angle of the Earth in relation to the sun is the opposite too. Is the part of the year that the southern hemisphere is more exposed comparative with the northern hemisphere. This makes that the amount of energy along the year is very different in each of these places. This make the well-defined seasons. There are times of the year that there are a lot of heat, and another ones is different. But an interesting thing happens in tropical areas, because we can see that independent of the angle that the Earth is in relation to the sun, the amount of energy in the tropical areas is more constant along the year. This means that the exposition is more have a less range of variation along the year. This makes that this season, summer, winter, and the 4 seasons in the general don't work for this area because the variation is not too high. This way, we have 2 different seasons, the dry season and the rainy season. So this difference in the climate across the planet have influences in the global biodiversity, how the species will be in different areas. And we can see that the most part of different animals, for example, are in tropical areas. The amount of species, the diversity of species of animals is bigger in tropical areas when compared these areas with the temperate areas and areas close to the poles. Talking about plants, we can see the same standards. The most part of the species, the number of species, is in the tropical areas and not in temperate areas or in polar areas. So there are another concept that is very important to biodiversity, that is the hotspots. This means that we have different points across the globe that have a lot of species, and these places have not just high biodiversity, but high level of endemism. This means that these places have species that just happen in this place, just exist in these places, and high level of human impacts is a high level of exploration in these areas. So, but why this happens? Why the most part of the species is in the tropical areas and not in the temperate areas or in polar areas? This is a complex question that you have a lot of discussion in the science about this, and years and years we have a lot of hypotheses for this, but I'm bringing here the main ones. The first of all is the climate of these places, because we have general features that are more comfortable for the living beings. How the temperature, if the temperature is too high or it's too low, this cause damages to the cells, to the tissues. This make that the temperature is more comfortable for the animals, for the plants in this place, because the range is not too much. We have to the more humidity in this place. The water is very important for most part of the organisms in this planet. So the humidity high in these places, together with the temperature, make this place more comfortable for the species. There are another things important, how the region is far from the poles of the earth, because how most close to the poles, more changes along the age of the earth we can have in these places, because the process of glaciation and deglaciation. Tropical areas is more far from these places, so they don't have these changes, this big change along the glaciation or deglaciation in the planet. This make these regions have more time to evaluation and the specialization of the species. Another interesting is the metabolic diversity, because we need to think that these conditions is more comfortable for the mushrooms, for the bacteria too. So the war, the big war, biological war is happening in these places. A lot of individuals together are fighting for surviving, for a space. This make that these individuals need to be more protective to survive. And there are a lot of papers that show that plants specifically in tropical areas have more metabolic diversity when we compare this with the temperate areas. And another thing is the level, is the velocity of extinction and speciation rates in these places that is faster. So, and the most part of this biodiversity is in tropical rainforests. And here we can see where these big rainforests are located. So I'm bringing some examples of this forest. We have the Amazon forest, that is the biggest forest in the entire planet. We have here a high level of biodiversity, more than 10% of species in this place. I don't know if here United States use hectare, is a way to see the size of the place, but here 1 hectare here have more species than United States and all the Canada, talking about plants, for example. But we are losing this area year after year, and the level of this destruction is so high that we can see this heat get out, and the NASA captured these pictures about the high level of smoke in the area that was happened in 2019 and is happening actually right now. Smoke is going to the cross of the countries and the entire continent. The second one, the biggest forest in the entire world, is the Congo Basin rainforest in Congo. The third one is the tropical rainforest in Indonesia. Indonesia, we have a lot of different islands. In the big one, we have the 30 biggest forest in the entire world. And I brought the Atlantic rainforest. Is not a big rainforest, but here, this place have the most biodiversity in the entire planet. And this is crazy when we consider it that now we lost it more than 70% of this area because the Atlantic rainforest is in the coast, most parts of the coast of Brazil, that is 70% of the people live over there. So the most part was destroyed and is the considered a hotspot. And we can think that these tropical areas have conditions that is better, is more comfortable for the living beings live over there. But this is not enough to keep this high biodiversity, to keep the humidity over there, because the winds just can take the humidity and go to another places. But it's the same way that the climate regulates how the species will survive in this forest. The forest change the climate in these regions, in the entire planet too. And I brought an interesting example of this is that the Amazon forest in Brazil that changed the climate in the entire continent, because we see that the most parts of the deserts in the planet in the subtropical areas. We see that more dried place. And in Brazil, we have subtropical areas that have more rain, more humidity because Amazonia. So we can see how is the level that is changed the climate in the places. And we call in Brazil, one thing that we call here, flying rivers. We say flying rivers, but here maybe you know how atmospheric rivers, that's a amount of the water that you window take and go to another places. I want to show you very fast how this happened.
So do you have audio in the PowerPoint?
It's not, you are not listening?
Yeah, we cannot hear the audio, but we can see the subtitle.
Okay, it's okay. So we have the evaporation that came from the ocean, and the Amazon take this humidity to the plant to make your metabolic stuffs, and the plants put in the atmosphere a lot of water because of the evapotranspiration that they make. And the amount of the water that the plant put in the atmosphere is bigger than the amount of the water that we have in the entire rivers in the Amazon. And we know that the sweet water in the rivers of Amazonia is the biggest in the entire world. But the plants put more water in the atmosphere, and this go to across all the country, make it rain in places that should be dried if you haven't not the Amazonia in these places. But how specific all this happens? And this justice is possible because the evapotranspiration that happened in the tree, because the tree take the water in the soil and put this in the atmosphere through the trunks. Now we're going to talk about how they do this, how is this tissue, how is the woods works to make this happen, and how the climate can regulate this process. So what we call wood actually in the science is the xylem. This is the name official of the woods. And we can see different parts, functional parts of this wood. The the center of this wood, we call heartwood, and we have the septwood, the external area. This area in the center of the wood just have the function of support and storage. The water don't go through this area. The water just is conducted in these areas of the septwood. After the vascular cells in bodies. They form new cells of woods and of phloem. Phloem is the part that take all the product from the photosynthesis in the leaves, the sugar, the energy, and they transport this for another parts of the plants. After the phloem, we have the periderm. Periderm we call bark. Is the external part, is a protective part of the plant. So I will not explain too much about this part, but we go start to compare differences between temperate areas and tropical areas. How is the woods of these species? And for example, I brought two groups that is very representative for these two areas, the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. The gymnosperms are plants that don't form fruits and flowers, and the angiosperms form fruits, flowers, and fruits. And we can see here a piece of wood of each of this group, and we see that they are different. The first big difference is the kinds of cells in these two groups, because the gymnosperms, the most part of the tissue of woods is formed for tracheides, is a kind of cell that make the three functions in the wood: the support, the storage, and the transport. And in the angiosperms, we have specific cells for each one of these functions. For the transport, we have the vessels elements. For the support, we have the fibers. For the storage, we have the parenchyma. And these two tissues have one kind of cell that is common, that is the rays, this green area. The rays make the communication between the center of the woods until the external part. Just to see the difference of these cells, the gymnosperm, this is the tracheides. They are very big comparatively with the cells of angiosperms. Here we have the vessels elements that make the conduction, fibers make the support, and parenchyma the storage. Some examples of gymnosperms we can call the group of conifers. Conifers is the term to talk about the phylum Coniferophyta. This includes a lot of famous species and groups like pines, firs, and spruce, that we have a lot of these groups here in California. We have, for example, Pinus ponderosa, we have here in campus of CSUB. We have the Sequoia dendron giganto, that is one of the species, the biggest species in the entire world, and is from maybe 2 hours from Bakersfield, is very close. They are huge. And Pinus longeva is a species with the oldest trees in the entire planet, is here in California too, some hours from here, Bakersfield. And all these species have a lot of characteristic features, adaptations to survive in this place, to survive to the low level of water and the big changes in the temperature and lower level in the nutrients in the soil. So these species are very strong. Here we can see where is the most part of the conifers, and we see association of this species with the places that is in temperate areas, which areas that change, that's cooler, that the temperature very have a variation along the year. Some examples of the angiosperms. I brought this species that is one of the species that I study in my PhD. Is a famous tree in South America. This tree is in the entire continent, is very important, and it is very impacted for the extraction because we humans can use the wood for making stuffs. Eriotheca pentaphylla is another tree that I study in my work, and is a species that is very restrictive. They just live in the Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. It's very specific from this area. And these two trees is different about how the leaves change along the year. This is a species that is evergreen. This means that the leaves don't fall down in no part of the year. They falling down some leaves, but the most part don't falling down together. How the deciduous trees, Cedrela is a deciduous trees, are trees that the most part of the leaves falling down in some part of the year. So talking about the part that form this wood, the cambium responds to different stimulation, internal stimulation, environmental stimulation, because this tissue needs to see if the plant have energy enough, resources enough to grow new tissues. So if there are a lot of energy, water, for example, is the time to form new cells. But if these resources is not enough, this tissue is stopped to work and don't form new cells. When we take a piece of wood and look in the microscope, we can see the cells, the each cells in the case. Here we can see that these cells is different from the another ones. They are more flat and the wall is more tiny because the division is so high in this place, in this area of the tissue, that they start to push the another cells. This make that they be more flat, and we can recognize in the microscope. For this part, the same tissue form wood. In the another part, this tissue form phloem. Here we can see that we have the same tissue, the cambium, for different groups. And we have this process that I told you before, that we have a time of the year that the tissue is active. This is the official name that we call this period, the active. And another period that the tissue stops to form new cells, we call dormance. And in both areas, we have this. We have activity of the tissue, you have dormancy of this tissue. Sometimes people think that in tropical areas, oh, there are more water, there are sun, the temperature don't change too much. Theoretically, the plants don't stop to grow along the year. They grow all the time, but it's not true. We can see that in tropical areas, the cambium stop to work when the change in the resources is not too big, but they change and the plant responds to this. Here we can see the product of this cambium is the wood. So when we take a piece of wood, we can see little marks. We call these mark rings. And when we put these samples in the microscope, we can see where is this difference. Why have different colors? These different colors is because the size of the cells is different. Here I'm showing an entire period of activity, this cambium, because they start 1 month and grow and stop in another month. Maybe it's just change across the species, 1 month, 2 months. some weeks, days. Here I take the one season of activity, and in the beginning of a activity is the time that you have more resources to make the new cells. So the cells are bigger. We see this white, almost white parts. B is begin, E is the end. And in the end of the season, we see tiny cells because there isn't too much water, there isn't too much energy, because the most part was for the beginning of the season. So this is what make the color be different in the woods. Here we have example for tropical areas that this happened to. We can see these marks. This is one season. The beginning of the season is different for the ends, but we see that the difference is not too high like the trees in temperate areas. When we look at this tissue, this wood in the microscope, we see exactly where is the change. We see here, for example, that the big cells in the beginning of the season make this line. And we see what is the cell, because here we have three kinds, remember? And here is in the parenchyma, these make these lines. The change of the vessels change too. The vessels are the pipes of the plant, the water go through these vessels. They change the size, but it's not too much like in the temperate areas. Here we see big differences between the tissue of this species. And the most part of the difference, what make in temperate areas gymnosperms be more easily to see this difference, because the tissue is homogeneous, because they just have one kind of cell. Here, we just have the difference in the size of the same cell, because all these stoicheids. Here, in the heterogeneous tissue, we have different kinds of cells. So the difference when we look just the wood is not too high when we look at homogeneous wood. And this makes the works in tropical areas more difficult when we compare with the temperate areas. But when the plants form, have the activity of the cambio once a year, we call that is an annual ring. The plant form one ring for year. This is what make it possible. We count these rings and it told the people how old is this tree. And the interesting part is that how this tissue respond to environment conditions. We can look at the cells, the format, how they change, the size of the rings, and see the story about the plant, how the environment have influence in this tissue, how was the previous climate. Is a big library in this woods. We can see episodes of burn, we can see pollution, we can see disease. So it's a big story about the plants. But what are the factors that have influence in the woods growth? Is a lot. Is a big variation of character features that have influence in this process. And this change across the environment. First of all, is the climate. Is a very, very strong variation. Here we are looking a place in United States, and we can see the range of variation in the temperature. We go of 20 degrees to -10. Here we have water, more the plants can use the water. Here we'll have water too, but the plants can't use the water here because it's frozen. So it's like the same that you don't have water. This is one of the big reasons that we see this very, very big difference in the woods in the beginning of the season and in the end. Here I have an example of angiosperm in the temperate area, just to see that these angiosperms happened in these areas too, but the amount of species is lower because the gymnosperms I told you that they are very strong. They have a lot of characteristics to survive in this place. But it's interesting because we see a big change in the vessels. Look at the size of the vessels in the beginning of the season and the end of the season. Look at this, we can see the amount of the water, the disponibility of the water is very different in the season, maybe summer, maybe winter. There are another thing that is very important when we analyze the growth of the trees, the woods, is not the climate, but the phenology too. But what is phenology? This term is we use for a lot of stuffs, but here specifically, I will use it to talk about the change in the leaves of the trees along the year, the period of that the tree have new leaves, or the leaves are old, or they falling down. But how this matter for the growth of the woods? We need to think that the leaves form the food of the plant, that is the sugar. So when the plant don't have the leaves, they don't have energy to grow all the plants and the wood too. So it's important for the wood to grow that the plant is forming energy in the leaves. So how the leaves work have influences directly about how the woods grow too. These carbohydrates, the sugars, they are produced in the leaves and they are transported to the woods and they can be used for the cambium for form new cells, or the wood just can storage the sugars to another phase of the year to form new leaves in the periods that is more the resources, there are more resources. This is a paper that I like very much because they put together these two features. Here in this is the levels of growth of the wood. Don't need to pay attention to different colors, but here the wood is growing. It's not, and time the leaves are old, so don't have energy to grow, so the woods don't grow. They just grow when the plants have leaves that can make a lot of sugars to make possible the woods grow. So for tropical areas is a little more difficult because when the place have more resources, water, is more humidity, the temperature change less, the endogenous factors have more influences. This make the thing more complicated because here the plants is the growth of the plants have association in different features all together to make the woods grow. And when we study these plants, we need to try to separate each factor, but it's very difficult. But it's still, the species in tropical areas respond to the climate. This is a thing that people sometimes say that is not possible, but is possible. Here we see a work about Cedrela odorata that exists in different areas of South America. And an interesting thing happens because here we see the climate of these different areas. This line over here is the temperature. We can see the temperature don't change very much, but the black area is the raining, is the pluviosity. We can see that this change across the places, more or less, but change. And this line over here, I will mark for you, is the period that the cambio is growing. The wood is growing in this period. And we can look that the wood just grow when we have water, when the period with more water of the year is not to change too much for -10, but still the plant responds to differences in the pluviosity along the year in different areas. This study, we can see the same thing, but here we have how the leaves change across the year, along the year. Here we can see first activity. This part, black part, is the period that the plant have leaves, and this black part is the pluviosity. So the cambium just work for this plant, Centrolobium robustum, when the plant have leaves and when the pluviosity is higher. In this case, we can see this. And the dormancy is the same. When don't have leaves, when there isn't too much water, the cambium don't form new cells. So exists a response to the climate in this area. And for another stuff that have influences in this process, we have this interesting work that analyzes how the wood is growing, and they saw that in periods that water is not too much problem, the rain is okay, the plant form fruits, but don't form new cells of wood. And in the period that the water is a problem, the plant don't form fruits, but the rings, the wood is growing. This show that there are a balance in the energy of the plants. They can't make everything grow in all the parts of the plant. So in the times that the water resource is not too big, the plant choice to put the energy for the wood or for the fruits. Each thing have take a lot of energy from the plant. And this work, they make some stuff that close what I want to make, is that analyze species that leaves falling down or leaves don't falling down, and how these species grow in different regions along the year in tropical areas. Here is the growth of the woods. And here is the precipitation and temperature. We can see that the plant is growing the woods when have more water in the environment. And here is the carbohydrates along the year. We see that amount of carbohydrates is bigger in this period that have more water, and the leaves is over there because this species is a decidual species. So in this part of the year, the leaves falling down. So they don't have too much carbohydrates energy. The energy that they have is to make new leaves in the another season. We are arriving in the end just to talk about what is specifically my work. In the first part of my project, I analyzed the difference in the wood between these species that leaves falling down or don't falling down along the trunk. I analyzed the trunk, the middle of the trunk and the branches. And the second part is that you have relationship. What I'm doing here is how the carbohydrates influences the activity of the cambium. And I collected the samples in Ilha Grande in Brazil, made a part of the process over there, the collection, drying, cutting, and crushing the samples, but it was not enough. And we made more this here in Bakersfield with the Dr. Pratt. The second phase is the extraction of the sugars because they are inside the cells. We need to put outside the cells and separate these sugars for the solid part, like we are seeing here. We take it just the liquid with the carbohydrates. And the enzymatic reaction is very important because here we will analyze different carbohydrates, glucose, starch, and sucrose. And to separate these different sugars, we need to use enzymes to react with these sugars. And all the sugars have glucose, but the size of the molecules, I think that's the word, is different. So we need to break these molecules and to the size be less, the tiny size, and the enzymes can react. And we see what is amount of the sugars along the year in this species. This is the last part that is the spectrophotometer that give us the number of this particle in the solution. And that's it. I want to thank you very much and for inviting me. I want to thank you, my advisors in Brazil that are here watching me, Drs. Calado and Vasconcelos. And I want to thank you very much, my advisor here, Dr. Pratt, for receiving me, helping me in all this process, and Dr. Jacobson for answer my first email and help me in all this process, and Sonia Silva that she helps me in all the stops in the university and the outside of the university. That's it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let's give Daiane a round of applause.